finally made real the Declaration of Independence.
The power and influence of this house.
Mécanique supérieure.
The host of the nations of the world on our own soil.
Bem-vindos à Sociedade das Nações, um programa semanal sobre a atualidade internacional aqui na SIC Notícias. A nossa convidada de esta semana é uma jornalista com larga experiência, tanto na Península Ibérica, como no Norte de África, como no Médio Oriente, como na América Latina. Trabalhou durante décadas para o New York Times e agora, que está mais ou menos reformada, publicou um livro que, por enquanto, ainda só existe em inglês, chamado Al-Andalus Rediscovered, Os Novos Muçulmanos da Península Ibérica. Marvine Howe, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the program. I learned a lot by reading this book, not least of which that Al-Andalus means in Arabic land of the Vandals, which results from the fact that when the Arabs...
Vandalusia.
Yes. It's interesting, huh? Which results from the fact that when the Arabs arrived here, the Vandals were here.
Exactly.
And the other very interesting thing that I learned is that the Arabic invasion of the Iberian Peninsula began with a dynasty from Damascus. Fascinating.
It was a dynasty from Damascus, but the people who came were Berbers from North Africa. And that's an important factor because you had the leadership who were Arabs, and you had a lot of lieutenants and foot soldiers who were Berbers.
There was a time when there were also some Syrians that came later on to help repress the local revolts.
The other important, I think, and true fact that you say is that although they were here for about 600 years in Spain and 700, the 8th century.
800 in Granada.
Yeah, and they were in Spain for about 100 years longer than here.
Yes.
In reality, when I studied Portuguese history, the history began with Dom Afonso Henriques. It just completely ignored, virtually, our Arabic ancestors, can I say?
Yes,
our Arabic,
ancestors.
Ancestors.
Well, but the ancestors were already invaders because, as you know, they were not like autochthonous people. I mean, so they were invaders also. I mean, the Arabs.
And do you find that continues, that people are still very ignorant, both here and in Spain, of this
I find a big
period of our history?
A big difference in the attitudes of the Portuguese towards their history and towards the present, and the Spaniards. The Spaniards are very divided over their history.
Civil War?
Not even the Civil War. Before the Civil War, you've got a nucleus of people who hate the Islamic past and the Jewish past, and they won't admit it.
That's
Whereas you've got, I think, a majority of the people who are now proud of it and are becoming familiarized with it. And I think that in recent years, this interculturalism has helped a lot. This came from the government and the ideas from the two governments that they should be intercultural, which is very different from multiculturalism, as you know. And Portugal had a different attitude towards its history, as you say, more ignorance. From what I can see in the school books, they just sort of pass over the whole Al-Andalus culture. Well, I'm not a historian, and I was interested in the attitudes towards the past, but how people think about it today.
Although, as you know, the two parts of the Andalus, the western part, what they call the Garb Al-Andalus, which is Portugal, was less important economically, socially than the other one. Because
like
the
today.
Other one, like today. Although we went into the sea and we became a seaborne empire, so we had other concerns. But one thing about the Al-Andalus that you mentioned is, do you think that the fact that Spain is the only country in the European Union that still has problems of border demarcation with Morocco, do you think that has a bit to do with that division in Spanish society about how to look at the Muslim world?
The Spaniards are pretty united about their
Ceuta and Melilla thing.
Ceuta and Melilla. That's ingrown in the Spanish culture and Spanish history. I haven't heard any Spanish people telling me, oh, let's get out of those troublesome places. And the Moroccans were very adamant about it as well, and they believe it's part of Morocco.
As you know, there are lots of families in Morocco that still have what they call the keys of their homes in Ceuta and Melilla, and they organize congresses each year about the dispossessed.
Yes. Last week I was in Spain, and I was talking to a Moroccan friend, and I said, What do you want? What do the Moroccans want from Spain today? And they said, we would like recognition of the Moriscos. We want the same recognition that Spain gave to the Sephardis, that they have advantages in becoming citizens, and that's what they want. They want the same recognition. They were expelled at the same time as the Jews, and Spain has not recognized the Moriscos yet. There is a movement to get it recognized.
I don't want to give the impression that this is a history book that I'm holding here. It's not a history book.
Although there is nothing bad about history.
There's nothing bad about history, but this is, in fact, this is a reporter's book, a journalist's book about the contemporary situation, both in Portugal and in Spain. And what was striking to me is that the immigration is very different. The Muslim immigration to Portugal and to Spain is very different. In Spain, you've got mostly economic immigrants coming in looking for jobs from North Africa. In Portugal, you've got people who came from the former Portuguese colonies, Muslims from Mozambique, from Guinea-Bissau. And you say they're much more integrated because of that, because they've been together with the Portuguese, so to speak, for 500 years, whereas the Moroccan immigration going into Spain, looking for jobs, is more isolated.
I wouldn't say isolated, and I would say give them time, because they have, it's just the first generation, basically. But the second generation feels Spanish, the second generation Moroccans. There is a difference, and that was why I was so interested in covering the two countries, because the attitudes are different of the Portuguese towards the immigrants and the Spanish towards their immigrants, and the immigrants are completely different. But and the way they came, as you said, the first Muslim communities after the expulsion, after 500 years, were the Retornados. And what's interesting is that most of them came from Mozambique and Guinea, of course. And the people who came from Mozambique are still leaders in the community, which is I found very interesting.
Although most of them are not Arabs, they came mostly from Pakistani,
Pakistani
families,
from Indian, Gujarat. They were mostly Gujarati, and they're still sort of dominating the Islamic community. In Spain, most of them came in the late 60s and the early 70s, thanks to Franco's Arab policy. And they were students, and they came and they stayed, and they too are the present day leaders of the Islamic communities in Spain.
One interesting topic, because you wrote also extensively about Morocco, and you knew the king, and you knew the willings and dealings of the father of this king, and that's my question is on the father and the son. The father you always described as a force for modernization of the kingdom. I mean, Morocco is close to Spain. Nothing that happens in Morocco will be stranger to Spain. Do you see the son going into the right direction of political pluralism and opening and eliminating focus of tension and opening the regime, or do you think it's a failed experiment?
Is there going to be an Arab Spring in Morocco, is what you're asking?
Well, the spring exists. The spring in Morocco exists. But do you think it's going to be until the last consequences, for instance, transforming the kingdom into a republic?
I don't see a republic, but I do see him continuing to open. He's beginning to open. He began to open as soon as he came to power, and he made a lot of changes. And I went down to Morocco for the Arab Spring to see how they were reacting, and I was in contact with a lot of the revolutionary movements in Morocco, and they're still around. The king was very wise, he and his advisors, to introduce the new constitution and the referendum. I was there during the referendum, and it was a great success for the king, because he had this very good reform, but of course doesn't go far enough. He still maintains absolute power over many domains. But he was clever enough to allow elections, and the very moderate PJD, which is modeled after my friends in Tunisia, in Turkey, and their PJD, that's the same, the AK party that's in government, they are now in power, and there's a little bit of competition, and you're going to have a lot of interesting movements opening. They're pushing, the king is pushing, and I think we're going to go, hopefully, in a peaceful, nonviolent way towards more open constitutional monarchy, a real constitutional monarchy.
You also published a book, I recall, some years ago on Turkey. So I'm correct about the two parts of Turkey. Let's say the one that pushes for a secular state, the one that wants like a closer.
They had a secular state, a very secular state.
But the one that wants to conserve it, and the ones that want it to evolve into something else. How do you see the Turkish model influencing the Arab Spring? Because one theory is that everyone in the Arab Spring wants to be
like
Turkey. I mean, we had here several Turkish ministers saying, well, we are not a role model, but maybe we can be an example for people. I mean, do you think they could be a good example?
I think so, yes. Because the AK party, the Islamist party, has succeeded. You know, the economy is doing very well.
Would you say Islamic or Islamist?
It's Islamist.
Would you
they don't say. They don't claim.
No, we had
they
them
say
here.
We have Islamic roots, and it's true that they do have other forces, other political components in the government. But I think basically they are Islamist. But open Islamist, not Salafi.
No.
So. But how do you marry that idea that Turkey might be an example for these Arab countries when we look around us on a daily basis and we see what seems to be an explosion of militant Islam? It's going on at the moment with this wretched film which showed up in the United States, which has provoked thousands of people of going onto the street. What I sometimes seem to be looking at is not let's be like Turkey, but let's be like Iran.
Well, I think
image.
It's a shame that every time you make some progress in the reconciliation of civilizations, and we were making some progress after the Arab Spring, then the radicals take advantage of the openings.
Any pretext.
And with modern communications, they can manipulate masses very easily. We've seen they did it in favor. It was in a favorable mode during the Arab Spring, but now they have been able to mobilize masses, exciting them with this stupid video.
But this is the question, isn't it? Can you mobilize a country to modernize, if we consider our example, the Western world as a modern group of nations? Can you do that with people who, at the drop of a hat, because of a rumor, because most of them haven't seen this film, go out onto the street and start throwing stones and petrol bombs? And are the two things not incompatible?
They're not incompatible.
They're not incompatible?
No.
You're an optimist.
I'm a definite optimist, and I do not believe in the clash of civilization. But I do think that they're radicals on all sides. You know, they say the film was started by some, like the Terry Jones people, you know, the Christian fundamentalists. Not just
we had a
Jewish.
Terry Jones here, but it's a different one. It's the guy from Monty Python. But
Oh, really? Okay. Anyway.
But I think that the author of the film, or the film itself, is kind of irrelevant.
Was a Christian cop.
The important thing to me is that it still brings thousands of people out on the street,
and it's because
in
of the
Indonesia,
communications.
in the Middle East, and it's also because of the fact that they believe that they need to go out and protest.
What Martin is saying is that never mind if you believe or not in clash of civilizations. There are people that are working for it. There are people,
that are following.
There are people in the streets that are, and this has also a lot to do with culture and the patterns of cultural education in each society. I mean.
But don't you remember? Aren't they saying that there was the same kind of revolt over the Da Vinci Code?
Oh yeah,
that the Christians were very
but no one
upset.
was killed.
No one was killed.
We usually don't kill people for cartoons on the Pope.
No, we've made a little advance. Okay,
well,
and I'm sure that Turkey hasn't killed anybody.
No.
And you've got an Islamic government in power, and he has actually had the guts Erdogan has had the guts to say that he believes in a secular state.
Yeah.
Who is saying that today?
Right. We were the first television in Europe, I think, that interviewed President Gül when he was nominated.
Really?
We went, Marti and me, we went to Istanbul, and he told us one interesting thing. He said, the Turkish constitution protects the rights of Muslims, Jews, Christians, agnostics, and non-practicing Muslims, which is an expression we usually don't use.
You never hear it.
We
in
say
the
non-practicing
Islamic word.
Christians, but we don't say non-practicing Muslims.
Which there are lots of them, I'm sure.
And I wanted to say something. There was a Spanish convert to Islam, Manuel Escudero, whom I knew very well. You may have met him. He was
I know him by name.
Okay, he was one of the leaders of the Islamic the commission, the recognized Islamic Commission in Spain. And he was, in the last interview I had with him just before his death, he told me, I believe in a secular state. This is a convert to Islam, one of the leaders of the community. And he said, because under a secular state, all religions are protected. And that is our guarantee of freedom.
Let me quote, to bring it back to your book again, quote something which I found it should be the lead of paragraph of chapter 13, where you say, the Iberian difference, in my view, is the commitment of political and civil leaders to dialogue with Muslims at the national, European, and global level. It seems to me, Portugal and Spain stand. I mean, I feel very proud of this. I think it's a very nice thing to say, but it does make us stand out, in your opinion.
Well, yes, of course. Where did the Alliance of Civilizations come from? It was here.
Turkish and Spain.
Zapatero's government
and the Turks.
And the Turks. No, but it was Zapatero who convinced
but
the Turks.
were
And they have carried it on, and they're very enthusiastic about it still, and they believe in it. And I think that I talked to President Sampaio frequently about this, and he was very troubled because under Bush, the United States didn't join, and he kept saying, this is a natural for the United States, and they've got to join. And finally, they joined. And I don't know, I think I tell the story, I'm not sure, of how they joined. But it was so quietly, because they were so afraid of provoking the radicals, who are against any kind of United Nations body. And there are people in the United States, I hate to say, who have this mental block against the United Nations, because they think it's dominated by pro-Muslims.
Well, were you surprised?
And before the Muslims, left-wingers.
Yeah, left-wingers.
Were you surprised that one of the cities in Europe that was touched by terrorism of an Islamic matrix, were you surprised that it was Madrid? I mean, that Madrid had bombings, and that we discovered that...
And that it was Moroccans?
Yes.
I was very surprised.
What did you think at that time?
Well, at that time, I thought you can always get a few radicals who'll throw bombs, and it was well planned. And of course, they had been contacted by the radicals in prisons, and that's the danger, is the prisons. Not the mosques, because the mosques seem to be in control of their beliefs.
Unlike what happened in England.
Yes, exactly, very different.
But don't you think that a good message from that tragedy is that even with that...
The reaction
was...
Spanish reaction was wonderful, and Portuguese both. I mean...
it was very subdued.
It was mature.
It didn't provoke a wave of reprisals and revenge, or
it woke people up to the fact that there are threats from radicals, and
you don't think that the Muslim community in Europe, the Muslim communities, should have a bigger role in denouncing those excesses, for instance?
They denounced, everybody in Spain
but you don't think that they should? In Spain it was an exception, and even the king recognized that the religious leaders, but you don't think that the Muslim leaders, religious leaders in Europe should have a bigger voice on denouncing radicalism, especially violent one?
I think it would be very helpful. I just know that in Spain and Portugal,
in Spain,
they
yes. In Spain, it was an example. In Portugal, we don't have that problem, as you know.
No, but they have also taken positions against the violence. The big anomaly, or the big strange factor, is the attitude towards September 11. In Spain, all my Muslim friends, do not believe that it was a Muslim-initiated attack. They all think it was CIA,
Inspired,
that it was CIA inspired and allowed, that it might have been a sting operation. I know there have been books written on this subject.
Of course, yes.
They believe this, which I don't know, most Westerners do not give any credit to whatsoever, because they don't think that the Arabs are that competent to be able to organize that kind of an attack. But that, unfortunately, has not been debunked, that attitude. And I think a lot of problems start with that, the underlying Islamophobia, if you wish.
But also conspiracy theories.
Yes.
They run very deep into the Muslim community. And that also has to do with education, as you
always. Marvine, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I wish you luck. Thank you once again for coming along. Congratulations on the book. And I hope to have you back here soon.
Yeah.
You live here after all, so
my base half the year.
We ought to keep in touch.
Thank you.
You very much. It's been a pleasure.
Great.
E vamos então à segunda e última parte do programa desta semana. Mais livros, Nuno.
É verdade. Nunca são demais, Martim.
Nunca são demais.
Olha, mas como sabes, cada crise política ou económica ou social provoca uma catadupa de obras sobre essa própria crise. E agora estamos na fase da catadupa de obras sobre a crise na zona euro. E a crise da dívida soberana. Até o Jorge Soros, que alguns culpam pela crise, escreveu um livro sobre a própria crise. Mas seja como for, este é um livro muito bem feito, porque é um livro que reúne uma série de autores de toda a zona euro, comandados, digamos assim, por um grego, Kostas Lapavitsakis, que é um professor de economia em Londres. Crisis in the Eurozone, fala de tudo.
É uma antologia, portanto.
É uma antologia, fala de tudo. Fala da parte económica, da parte social, da parte política, do desemprego, do que pode acontecer com os países periféricos, maneiras de sair da crise, é possível a Europa acabar como unidade política. Crisis in the Eurozone, um livro que me parece essencial para compreender muitos aspectos talvez pouco conhecidos
e altamente atual.
Não é um livro muito grande, como tu vês, tem muitos gráficos na parte económica, mas é um livro que está muito bem escrito e eu recomendava sinceramente. Uma das mensagens é que a Europa vai ter que aprender a ser mais pobre.
Com certeza.
Vai ter que aprender a ser mais pobre.
Eu, por mim, já cheguei a essa conclusão.
Mas o problema é que nós achamos, às vezes, que a crise se abate sobre Portugal, mas as pessoas não sabem que, por exemplo, os franceses, os italianos, os espanhóis, os alemães, estão a viver todos bastante pior do que viviam há uns anos atrás. Depois, para as pessoas que gostam de cinema, para as pessoas que gostam de literatura, para as pessoas que gostam do Fernando Pessoa, um livro muito pouco conhecido, Fernando Pessoa, Argumentos para Filmes. O Fernando Pessoa, quando escrevia poesia, também queria ser um realizador de cinema e queria escrever argumentos para filmes. E tem neste livro várias coisas que ele escreveu para filmes de fantasia, filmes de humor, filmes...
Não são, portanto, adaptações das obras dele.
São ideias que ele teve para fazer filmes. Quer dizer, se o Fernando Pessoa fosse vivo, provavelmente traria a SIC várias ideias para séries, para filmes de folgo. É um livro muito interessante porque não tem nada a ver com a obra que nós conhecemos do Pessoa e mostra que o Pessoa estava muito atento às novas formas de arte que se passavam na Europa e no mundo, por exemplo, também nos Estados Unidos. E depois trazia 2 livros sobre pensamento político. Eu não sei se te lembras, em 75 ou 74, depois da Revolução, o CDS tinha como principal ideologia o personalismo. Era o personalismo. Quer dizer, havia partidos sociais-democratas, havia partidos socialistas e havia um partido personalista que era o CDS. Era a doutrina que o Frei José Manuel professava, o Linamar da Costa. E o pai do personalismo era um francês, o Emmanuel Mounier, que quis fazer qualquer coisa entre o socialismo e o capitalismo, vagamente inspirado na doutrina social da Igreja, mas não apenas. E este livro é sobre isso, é sobre o Emmanuel Mounier, chama-se Mounier, o compromisso político, de um francês chamado Guy Coq, e é, portanto, já um livro arqueológico, digamos assim, sobre ideologias.
Essa teoria, isso ainda existe?
Ainda há personalistas que influenciaram, digamos assim, outros partidos políticos. Há partidos políticos em França que são influenciados, mas já é, de certa maneira, uma relíquia histórica.
Ultrapassada.
Mas por isso é que nós precisamos de livros para chegar às relíquias. O Al-Andalus também já não existe e ainda tens aí um livro.
Exatamente.
Tens aí um livro sobre o assunto. E depois, a Lívia Franco, professora de Relações Internacionais, Pensar a Democracia com Tocqueville. O Alexis de Tocqueville foi talvez um dos grandes pensadores da chamada democracia pluralista no século XIX, a democracia liberal pluralista. Foi um grande observador dos assuntos políticos norte-americanos, como sabes, fez a famosa obra da Democracia na América, onde raciocinou pela primeira vez com grande fogo sobre quais tinham sido as condições que os americanos encontraram para construir um modelo democrático. Uma das expressões do Tocqueville, nunca mais me esqueço, que para mim é fundamental, é qual foi a primeira impressão que ele europeu teve quando chegou aos Estados Unidos no século XIX. Primeira impressão. Não, a primeira impressão. Não, século XIX não havia automóveis. Sabe qual foi a primeira impressão? O ruído. Ele achou que aquilo que caracterizava os Estados Unidos e a primeira cidade que eu fui foi o ruído.
As fábricas.
Não, o ruído das pessoas na rua, o ruído das carroças,
eu não sei
o
se
ruído
acontece contigo, isso é o que me impressiona a mim cada vez que eu vou a Nova Iorque.
O ruído.
Impressionante o barulho
por exemplo,
que há nas
tu vais
ruas.
para algumas cidades da Europa Central, por exemplo, Ljubljana, as grandes cidades da Europa Central, e são estranhamente silenciosas. As pessoas, por exemplo, não se riem nas ruas com a voz alta. Em Portugal também há algum ruído. Também somos um bocadinho ruidosos,
Sim,
não acho?
Mas, falando em ruído,
Olha,
estou a brincar. Certamente não é ruído. Tens aí. É música.
Eu podia ter trazido música do Médio Oriente, mas temos estado a pô-la várias vezes. E trouxe então um grupo da Europa Central, da Croácia, chamado Mlado Pivo, que é muito influenciado pela música do Médio Oriente. Quer dizer, eles são croatas, mas têm muitas influências da Turquia, enfim, de outras músicas médio-orientais. E esta canção chama-se Moja Moja, e eu acho que vais gostar, acompanhada com um acordeão que eu acho encantador, os Mlado Pivo.
Moja Moja dos Mlado Pivo.
Tu falas um croata impressionante.
Não se pode dizer
Falas
que
um croata
aqui
impressionante.
não se aprende coisas novas. Neste programa aprende sempre qualquer coisa nova. E se o quiser ver outra vez na internet, pode fazê-lo e consultar estas sugestões do Nuno. Para isso, basta aceder ao nosso site em sicnoticias.sap.pt e pode, como sabe, também escrever-nos. O nosso endereço eletrónico é sdn@sic.pt. Nós voltaremos para a semana que vem.
Gazimo kar do koža, svima pod nos gura na kran I tvoju poruku može, Višem sa krova, ta 4 slova, može